Hello and welcome back to our trip, Lisbon, Portugal to Copenhagen, Denmark, aboard the Silver Sea, Silver Spirit. This is part 2, where we make a stop in Bilbao, Spain, before heading off for 3 days in Bordeaux, France. We arrived and docked in Bilbao around 8 in the morning and enjoyed a beautiful sail-in to the port. As in most mornings, after a bit of exercise in the fitness center, we dressed for our excursion and headed upstairs to the Arts Cafe for a bit of breakfast. Breakfast in the Arts Cafe amounts to fresh fruit, juices, and pastries, as well as a few wraps featuring breakfast items like eggs and bacon. But we were there for our morning cappuccino, and then it was off to prepare for our excursion. In this video, we're going to highlight the excursion that we took in Bilbao, Spain. This excursion was not through Silver Sea. Instead, it was arranged as a perk by our travel agent, Pavlis Travel, through a group called Travel Partners Network Distinctive Voyages. We had originally scheduled the Bilbao walking tour through Silver Sea. However, we canceled that and took advantage of this new option offered to us. The Travel Partners Network is a consortium of travel agents, tour companies, and travel providers like Silver Sea. Certain voyages have complimentary excursions available on select distinctive voyages as a perk for using a service provider, travel agent, or travel agent connected to the Travel Partners Network group. When we entered our suite at embarkation, there was a distinctive voyages package waiting for us. The package introduced us to our host, Judy, invited us to a cocktail reception where more details would be provided, and laid out an outline of the excursion. We signed on, and upon landing in Bilbao, we embarked upon this special excursion. The excursion itself was entitled Bilbao, Past and Present. It would be about 6 hours in duration and include a tour of Bilbao, some interesting stops and photo opportunities, and finally lunch and then an extended visit to the world-famous Guggenheim Art Museum. After driving through Bilbao, our first stop was the Vizcaya Transporter Bridge. This novel bridge, quote-unquote, was designed by Basque architect Alberto de Palacio and opened in 1893. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and is described by UNESCO as a perfect blend of beauty and function. They go on to say, it is a unique yet spectacular example of industrial architecture. It is the first and the world's oldest gigantic transporter crane and still is in use today. It is not what I consider an actual bridge, but more resembles a magic carpet, with the gondola almost noiselessly gliding over the water, magically carrying people and vehicles across the estuary on its 1.5-minute journey. Almost 3 million people are transported across the Vizcaya Transporter Bridge each year. If time allows, you can absolutely use the bridge to cross the Nervión River, utilizing the magic carpet, or if you pay a little more, you can take the elevator to the top and walk across the top of the bridge. If we had been allowed the time, we were not, I would have walked across the top and then glided back on the magic carpet. That adventure would have cost me $8.22 to walk across the top of the bridge and an incredible 65 cents to use the gondola back. There was at one time 20 plus of this type of bridge located around the world. However, only 8 examples survive today, and only 7 of those 8 are still in use. Those 8 are the bridge you see here today. The others are in France, 3 in the United Kingdom, although one of those is the bridge that is no longer used, 2 in Germany, and 1 in Argentina. There was a transporter bridge built in Duluth, Minnesota, but it was later converted into an aerial lift bridge and no longer functions as a transporter-type bridge. Leaving the Vizcaya Bridge behind, we hopped on our coach and headed for our next stop. Our next stop would be Mount Artsanda. Elevation 873 feet makes it fall a little short of a mountain, but the locals call it a mountain, so a mountain it is. From the stunning views of Bilbao to the park-like surroundings, to the enigmatic giant fingerprint sculpture, to the highly rated Basque local restaurants, the lookout at the top of Mount Artsanda is well worth a visit. The lookout spot can be hiked to or cycled to if you are particularly ambitious, or ascended to from the city by the city's funicular, or, more realistically, accessed as we did by mundane vehicular transport. A sculpture by artist Juanjo Novia is a giant fingerprint, also known as huella dactilar. The sculpture is a memorial to the victims of the Spanish Civil War. We wandered around the park-like area, admiring the rest of the memorials and the pervasive yet interesting graffiti that's everywhere, and grabbed one more look down the mountain at our next destination. Lunch in Bilbao, followed by the Guggenheim Art Museum. Our coach dropped us in Bilbao, about 3 blocks from our lunch venue. We had a chance to stroll the streets for a while, admiring the architecture, both old and new. As we walked toward the restaurant, we came across this interesting poster about a musical festival that I certainly would have attended if possible. Continuing on from the Alan Parsons Project and the Dead Daisies, we eventually spotted a bust of none other than John Adams, who visited the area to learn about the Basque form of government in 1780. We soon arrived at our lunch venue, Restaurante Zirkin, and there we descended to the basement to a private dining room for our included luncheon. The restaurant's basement was simply decorated and a well-lit but utilitarian-style space. The tables were set up so we could converse with fellow guests relatively easily while enjoying a glass of wine. The simple salad was elevated by a round of fried goat cheese topped with a raspberry vinaigrette. The main dish was strips of what appeared to be pork belly, tasty and melt-in-your-mouth unctuous. For dessert, we were served a panna cotta topped with a raspberry puree. Satisfied, it was once more time to ascend those stairs and navigate the streets of Bilbao. After a short walk, we arrived at the final destination of our tour, the Guggenheim Art Museum. The Guggenheim in Bilbao is an impressive structure designed by architect Frank Gehry. The structure itself is a work of deconstructivist art. When looking at the structure as a whole, the eye can find nothing to latch onto as the building continues to morph and change with even the smallest changes in the ambient light. And the art starts right on the doorstep of the museum with Puppy, a living sculpture by artist Jeff Koons. Created in 1992, Puppy is covered with an incredible 35,000 living flowers and plants and stands at an impressive 43 feet tall and holds over 25 tons of soil to support the growth of those 35,000 flowers. We moved to the other side of the Guggenheim to see what we could see and found more sculptures braving the elements, like Tall Tree and the Eye by Anish Kapoor, and this bizarre sculpture set against the backdrop of the bridge, Mammon, a 30-foot spider sculpture created in 1999 by artist Louise Bourgeois. To the inside, and after admiring the interior structure of the building, we visited the permanent exhibit in Gallery 104. This is a series of sculptures on a huge scale, The Matter of Time by artist Richard Sierra. Entirely made of rusting and weathered steel, one walks not around the sculptures but through the free-standing, free-flowing walls of the steel that is set at odd angles and molded into soft curves. I only made it through 3 of the structures before emerging slightly disoriented and nauseous from the perspective-altering claustrophobic spaces that is the sculpture. We proceeded to one of the smaller galleries to see how, through scale models and photos, the sculptures were designed and built. Moving on to the second floor of the museum, we passed and perused many pieces of hanging art. That was much more enjoyable than having your senses battered and abused by the large steel structures on floor 1. Much of the art was new to me, although there was one Pablo Picasso hanging. And then I stepped into this room. This was interesting. A piece of digital art, seemingly free-flowing and free-generating, and set to an ominous drone in the background. As I pan around a little bit, you'll see just how big this room actually was, and to say the least, the longer you stood there, the more immersive this type of art became. To the second floor, we noticed that there was an orchestral performance going on. This looked like it could have been a youth orchestra with a couple of older members seated within. Let's play a game. What is this? Let's change the perspective a bit. Still unsure? Let's check it one more time from the back. Ah, tulips. This was Gallery 303 on the 3rd floor, and this type of art was really more to my liking. It was big. Stepping out of my now favorite gallery, 303, we headed back out into the museum and checked out more pieces of art on our way to the exit. Well, that was about it. Time to leave the museum and head back to the Silver Spirit. Nothing more to do on this excursion except for fill out the survey and give Distinctive Voyages high marks for a job well done. So if I hold Distinctive Voyages to the same standards I hold Silver Sea to, I have to give them this score. Value, of course, is 3 stars, because this was a perk given to us by our travel agent and we didn't pay anything additional for it. Accuracy of the tour description, also 3 stars. Were all the scheduled stops made? Yes, they were. Was the time allotted at each stop adequate? Well, yes, it was. A little more could have been given to us at the museum. Our tour guide was fine. She started to go into overblown tour guide mode at the museum, but was quickly asked to rein that in and save it for the bus by our Distinctive Voyages travel host. The food arranged by Distinctive Voyages was very good. The overall experience was top-notch, and would I recommend this excursion to a friend? Why, yes, I would. We returned to the ship to find that my card would not scan through the reader, which as it turned out became a common occurrence. In fact, I had to replace my card 4 times during this voyage. And soon after we returned, it was time for the sail away, and there were a number of people out on the breakwater to bid us goodbye. No one was waving, but no one was shaking their fist at us, so I assumed we left on good terms. Changing clothes, and our dinner tonight would be in Silver Note. Silver Note is an interesting venue, which Silver Sea calls a modern take on tapas, and encourages the guest to select several of the smaller plates from this menu. Check out our complete dining and drink guide coming soon. Now, we truly enjoy dining at Silver Note. The dishes are interesting and tasty, and in essence, it is a smoky jazz club without the smoke, where you are serenaded during your dinner by a pianist who is later on joined by a diva who sings the blues and a bit of light jazz. With the fine food and the interesting entertainment, it makes for a very enjoyable evening. Well, that was it. After a bit more carousing around and fooling around on the ship, it was time to turn in and ready ourselves for tomorrow, when we made our first port in France, Bordeaux. We sailed through the estuary and entered the Gijon River. Here we are passing the small city of Pauillac on the estuary, and finally making it to the Gijon River for what amounted to a beautiful and interesting sail into Bordeaux. It is about 50 miles from the mouth of the estuary to the center of Bordeaux, where we shared the river with these river vessels from Uniworld and Viking. Bordeaux is a city of about 259,000 within the city limits and over 1.3 million in the greater metropolitan area. Once docked, we debarked the ship for a walk around town with our friends from the area, Ronald and Oksana. We had docked essentially right in the center of the downtown area, so we just stepped off the ship and into the city. The city center of Bordeaux is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is essentially just filled with interesting architecture and a maze of small, tiny streets. Ronald grew up in the Bordeaux area, so we got the deluxe tour and walked about the center of Bordeaux. We passed entertainment venues and grand hotels and wandered the streets shared with cars and trolleys. We even passed, but did not go in, of course, a Gordon Ramsay restaurant. Pretty fancy. This is the premier shopping area of Bordeaux, and the usual suspects were quite present. Years ago, this was a single theater, now holds 12 theaters. The only real reliable and quick way to get around the center of town is on foot. Once a home to a castle or chateau, this large square is now a meeting place dominated by this fountain and used as an entertainment venue in the large open space beyond. This fountain itself has an interesting history where part of it was stolen by Hitler and the ship it was being carried on was sunk in World War II. The parts that were stolen were later recovered from the ocean floor and returned to France. The highlight of our walkabout was to sit and share a bottle of wine with Ronald and Oksana at a sidewalk cafe. Too soon, it was time to return to the Silver Spirit and bid adieu to Ronald and Oksana. After wandering the decks a bit and admiring the Napoleon Bridge from afar, we changed for dinner and headed to Dolce Vita for canapes and a before-dinner drink. Dinner tonight would be again in Atlantide. Check out our upcoming complete dining and drink guide coming soon for more on Atlantide and all of the rest of the venues aboard the ship. After dinner, and it was back to Dolce Vita for a listen to pianist and sometimes singer Azulis. This is a tune that Song requested the night before. He didn't know it, but he went away and learned it for her. After listening to Azulis for a while and admiring the Napoleon Bridge all lit up at night, it was time for bed. The next day, and it was day 2 of Bordeaux, France. The wide promenade just outside the ship is extremely busy, with locals and tourists alike. And after a quick breakfast at La Terrazza and a cup of cappuccino at the Arts Cafe, it was time for our excursion. Today, that excursion would put us on a bus, rocketing around Bordeaux for a so-called scenic tour with no stops. That wasn't very scenic. But certainly the highlight of this tour was the Cité du Vin, or the City of Wine Museum. We were taken inside, handed our tickets, and told to meet in the lobby in 1 hour and 45 minutes. So turned loose, we explored the museum. The museum is all things wine, where it is grown, the climates in which it's grown, and the making and even the distribution of the wine throughout the world, as well as a history of wine. There's even a high-tech nod to the idea of crushing the grapes with your feet, as was done in the old days. The museum itself is a high-tech masterpiece and multimedia experience where you are handed a device and told how to use it in sort of a self-guided tour. The devices can speak in several different languages, so each guest can get the most out of their experience. Many of the displays are high-tech and interactive. Many of the areas are small theater-like presentations that detail the history of winemaking. Here's an interesting exhibit. Though while with all the horns it may appear musical, it is not. You squeeze the bulb, stick your nose down there, and it should come up with a scent that is common in different wines. The wine's nose, so to speak. This display was to show everyone the different colors of wine. This presentation, all about corkscrews. And then, of course, the biggest corkscrew in the world for the biggest bottle of wine. And we went through 5 stories of more wine, wine, wine. modern wine production techniques. On the second floor, there's even a wine library. Your admission ticket includes all the time you would like to spend here perusing the hundreds of volumes about wine. Or you can go to the Thomas Jefferson Auditorium for lectures. After you get your fill of the museum, it's time to head to the 8th floor for a bird's eye view over Bordeaux and the Garonne River. Before trading your tickets in for a wine tasting. The cost of admission is 22.6 euros per adult and includes one glass of wine at the end of your tour, or actually any time that you want to indulge. There were about 14 different wines on display and being poured that day. Had 2 more glasses of wine, the pain of the first part of the excursion might have been more tolerable. After a nice rosé for me and a sweet sauterrain for Song, we went to the first floor and browsed through the boutique. The boutique features, of course, all things wine, but really no wine. However, if you go next door, here is the wine you were looking for. And a hugely impressive collection of wine it is. All for sale, from the inexpensive wines to some rather pricey wines. And there's a 1,090 euro bottle on sale for 760. What a deal. And while the building itself covers 3.3 acres, I couldn't find a good estimate for the grounds, but I would estimate roughly twice that. Well, tour of the wine museum over, and it was time to rate it and head back to the ship. This was an included excursion, so we didn't pay anything, so that was pretty good. I have to highly rate the accuracy of the tour description, since we did exactly what they said we would do, drive around on a bus and then go to the museum. There was only one scheduled stop, and certainly we stopped there. The time allotted at that one stop was sufficient. Our tour guide actually added nothing to the excursion, so he is rated neutrally. The wine tasting, for what it was good. The overall experience, once we got to the museum, was very good. Would I recommend this to a friend? Well, with reservations, because while I thought the museum was fine, I think you would be way ahead if you just went to the museum on your own, bought admission, and avoided the first part of the Scenic, quote-unquote, tour. From the wine museum, and it was back on the bus and back to the Silver Spirit. We were back in time for lunch, so we went to La Terrazza and chose from the offerings on the buffet. One of us went healthy, and the other, well, maybe not so much, but who can resist a killer bread pudding? Well, to work off some of those calories we picked up at the buffet, we exited the ship once more and went for another walk ourselves in downtown Bordeaux. We started at one of the old city gates. Built in 1495, this is the Old Palace Gate that leads directly back into the Old Town. Enjoy as we wander about, once more checking out the small streets and alleyways of Bordeaux. As we wandered about, we found the Church of St. Pierre, built in the 14th and 15th centuries. Continuing on through the narrow streets, we found literally dozens, if not hundreds, of small cafes and bars. Having seen the graffiti adorning many of the buildings, we were on the lookout for one of those graffiti artists, and we finally caught one. But now that we've caught him, what do we do with him? Leaving the city center, we continued our walk along the promenade, checking out the traffic on the river and the locals walking the promenade. Soon enough, it was back to the ship once more. in time to change for dinner, and this time it would be at Hot Rocks. Hot Rocks is that interesting venue on the pool deck that changes from hamburgers and hot dogs during the day to the venue called Hot Rocks in the evenings. Here you can cook your own meal on superheated lava rocks brought to your table. As always, you have your choice of several wines to indulge in. Interestingly, it was here in the most casual of the dining venues on board that we were introduced to the connoisseur's wine list. If you are unhappy with your choices on the regular list of wines, you are always welcome to select something by the glass or by the bottle from the connoisseur's wine list. It ranged from not too bad to, well, let's just say expensive. We opted to stay with the included selections and began our meal. Out came those lava rocks, heated to a whopping 750 degrees Fahrenheit or 400 degrees centigrade, on which were piled our selections. Hers, a sea bass, and a couple of big prawns. And for me, a nice 16-ounce boneless prime ribeye. More on the grill and Hot Rocks in our upcoming dining and drink guide. With that out of the way, we indulged in some of the entertainment that night and then hit the sack in anticipation of another day in Bordeaux. It was an early start the next morning, and we had an 8 o'clock excursion to the village of St. Emilion. St. Emilion is about a 50 to 60 minute trip from Bordeaux. This was a Silver Sea Select excursion costing $109 per person, about 4.5 hours in length, and a total of 2 hours, more or less, traveling to and from the village. While the area has been settled for almost 35,000 years, it is thought the Romans established vines there as early as 27 AD. However, the area became more settled and a major wine-producing area in the 7th century AD. One modern convenience that kept popping up regularly were these ATM machines all over town. I kept wondering, why does this tiny little village need all of these ATM machines? Continued to wander the small cobblestone streets of St. Emilion, passing by police departments, hotels, restaurants, and churches. Courtyards and more ATM machines, before finding the reason for all those ATM machines: the wine shops. In this tiny community, there are wine shop after wine shop, wine bar after wine bar, displaying progressively larger and larger bottles of wine. Until I think we found the granddaddy of all wine bottles. This one here. Need some scale? There you have it. Party in a bottle. And right next door, well, another ATM, of course. These very interesting paths up and down through the city would have been interesting to traverse if it had not been raining earlier. They were rather slick. We passed by yet another bell tower of a church that led us to probably the best lookout point over St. Emilion. Please enjoy as we continue our tour around the village, which, as you can guess by now, is centered around wine and wine production. Here's another of those interesting descents, but this one guarded by polar bears. And passing by this church led us to the edge of the village and our route back to the bus. Back on the bus, and we headed towards our next stop, just a mile or so down the road, and home to Bordeaux Celine, the Chateaux Honfleur. And my apologies to French speakers everywhere. We received a quick tour of the grounds of the chateau and the production facilities. First stop, one of the vineyards, literally only steps from the winery itself. Our tour guide gave us a brief explanation of which varietals are grown there and in the region before taking us into the fermentation center, into one of the barrel rooms,
Cannot bottle before February 2022. So basically you have to age the wine during this time, so either in concrete, in stainless steel, but the most part of the chateau do it in barrels because it's the typicity to the Saint-Emilion wine.
And finally, into the tasting room itself. We would be tasting two wines today, one a red and the other a Coruna, a sort of champagne-like wine. To at least my humble palate, was more complex and tastier than most champagnes that I have tried in the past. During the tasting, our host was asked how long the wine could be cellared for, and he replied as much as 10 years. One of our fellow guests replied cleverly, "I would have to drink it well before the 10 years had passed." Why, he was asked. "Because at my age, 10 years could be a lifetime," he replied. Mission completed, and it was back on the bus and back to the ship. So how would we rate this excursion? Well, rather well. It was a selected excursion and cost $109 per person. The reason it was not a full 3 stars is there was a lot of travel time on the bus. The excursion was accurately described, all scheduled stops were made, and the time allotted seemed to be, well, enough. The tour guide was good and knew when to get out of the way and when to speak up. There was no food involved, but the wine tasting was successful. And I have to say that the overall experience was very good. And would I recommend this to a friend? Well, yes, certainly. Saint-Emilion is a wonderful and interesting village, unique and well worth the visit. Well, we made it back to the Silver Spirit and just in time for sail away. Access to the ship had been all blocked off to allow the teardown of all the fencing and the gangway. The sail down the river was very interesting, and we passed by some of those same monuments and squares that we had visited on foot. Crowds near the riverside to bid us adieu. And again, they were waving, no raised fist, so I guess we had behaved ourselves while we were in Bordeaux. passed a few of the smaller river cruise ships, this one from Uniworld, and headed toward the first bridge, which was a movable span bridge. The roadway had actually been lifted high enough to allow the ship to go under, while all traffic on the bridge was stopped on both sides for a few hours. Passing under the first bridge, the sail-away became a party, with many of the officers of the ship and the hotel taking to the top deck to socialize with the guests as we enjoyed the sail-away from Bordeaux. Leaving the movable span bridge, we passed by the wine museum and passed under this time a large suspension bridge. Watch carefully and you can actually see a worker dangling from the bridge. Well, it turned into a party with guitarist Diego providing music to the crowds during the sail-away. Favorite, another BBC, and here it is, being custom made for us. We were once more sailing the 45 miles toward the mouth of the estuary, where we would turn right and head up the coast of France for a day at sea en route to our next stop, St. Malo. Oh, but we had bigger things on our mind, and that, of course, would be dinner tonight again at La Terraza. Please check out our complete dining and drink guide coming soon for more on La Terraza and all of the other venues aboard the Silver Spirit. Tonight, we had made a special off-menu request for Ossobuco. Silver Seas Kitchens welcome limited special requests and will accommodate you if they can. After dinner, we headed up to the Panorama Lounge for an after-dinner drink, and by then we were sailing the Atlantic on our way to the next port of call. We enjoyed some entertainment tonight in the Venetian Lounge, where we were entertained by the Pianotainers, two musicians and entertainers that bordered on being comedic and had what I would consider an extremely interesting take on piano entertainment. Finishing our evening with Pianotainers, we weren't quite finished. It was time now to go up and see what the Arts Cafe had to offer. After 9 o'clock at night, the Arts Cafe offers a selection of desserts and, most importantly for song, chocolate. So as the sun sank low, we loaded up our plates with chocolate and headed back to our suite. The next day would be a day at sea en route to St. Malo. Well, thank you for watching, and please like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be kept up to date with new videos as they are released. Please check out some of our other videos if you have the time and the inclination. And stay tuned for our next part 3 of 8, which I promise will be a much shorter one, a day at sea en route to Saint Malo and Saint Malo, France. Thank you for watching, and as always, safe and happy travels from Tees, Cruise, and Travel Muse.